Hello and welcome to this GCSE Geography revision video. My name is Aaron and I'm going to be taking you through this 1.2.1 theme for the WJC exam board for, as I said, GCSE Geography, and we're going to be looking at erosional and transportational methods. Now, the first thing to remember is that this theme, 1.2.1, covers a broad variety of things, like many things within the GCSE Geography spec. So, this particular thing, I'm going to call it 1.2.1 because again it's going to work towards us understanding the courses of the river. We're going to look at the landforms of the different courses, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the coastal landscapes as well, because you'll notice that the key question is, how do processes work together to create landform features at different scales in river and coastal landscapes in Wales? Now, this is for the WJEC, however, you are more than welcome to use this as a revision video for any other exam board, because I know some of the exam boards have some of the exam boards do have like little links between them in terms of the content that you need to learn. So, we're actually going to get straight into it. Now, what I will say is, it is really, really helpful if you, what I'm about to teach you, if you either take notes or you can purchase the notes that I've already made for you. You can literally just print them out and keep in your book for reference. So, let's have a look at the definitions for both erosional and transportational. So, when we talk about erosion, this is talking about the geological processes. So, we're talking about things like rocks. We're talking about things like, you know, the actual underground bit of where the river is, but this is about where they're worn away, and there are different ways that these rocks are worn away. And then transportation links into erosion, but it's sort of the next part of the definition. So this is when those materials that have been worn away, they're transported. It's in the name. It's being transported somewhere else. So, in order to remember the four erosional processes, I've sort of put together a little bit of something that you can remember by just using four letters. So, HAAS. H-A-A-S. So, if you remember them in this order, it's going to be much easier for you to remember them in exams if you're asked about them. So, H is for hydraulic action. The first A is for attrition, the next A is for abrasion, and the S is for solution. Now, realistically, there are only three that you have to remember for each, for the erosional and transportational each, so that's 6, because solution is the same in both of them. So, let's take a little bit of a look at hydraulic action. Now, hydraulic action is basically, and this is I think I spelled shear wrong. I'll go back and change that. Hydraulic action is when the shear pressure that is being created from the air force themselves into different cracks and crevices. So this is in the rocks, again, if it's being pushed underground. And a perfect example of this would be this picture here. So when the waves are created, obviously that's going to be due to the wind and the earth moving. So when the waves swish up, air is pushed and pushed and pushed until it goes into the cracks and crevices so much that it splits. And there's a little bit of a note here as well. Again, as I said, the air resistance, when the waves get really high, that causes the air to be pushed into the rocks. Let's have a look at attrition now. Now, I've got a little bit of a GIF or a GIF that explains it quite well. So this is when rocks crash into each other. Important words. I've underlined and bolded the words that will help you remember them. So when they crash into each other, they break into smaller particles. Then we're going to look at abrasion, which is the rocks grinding or rubbing against the riverbed. So this is different to attrition, because attrition is when the rocks crash into each other, and usually they are a bit bigger. They're a bit bigger and they crash into each other and obviously split apart. But with abrasion, this is when it's rubbing against the riverbed. And you can almost see it, well, you can see it in this picture, through the turbulence of the water. It's obviously moving the rocks around and around and around, and they're being rubbed against the bed. And this is a bit like sandpaper. When you rub something with sandpaper, it gets smaller, doesn't it? Or it gets smoother. So think of it a bit like that. And then this final one, solution, can be also called corrosion, so be careful, because the exam board could say define corrosion and it just means the same thing as solution. But as I said, this one is the exact same for both erosion and transportation. this is when the water is dissolving the minerals. So different minerals, you don't have to learn them, at least for the WJC, but it's useful to know, for example, things like rocks, such as limestone, because that is quite a soft rock. And again, here is a diagram, and typically solution is the smallest particle. So as I said, you've got, this is actually for transportational methods, but it does the same thing, because as I said, solution is in both. So solution tends to be the one with the smallest particles. Now, what I've done is I've put together some past paper questions, or I've created some past paper questions off the top of my head. You can pause the video to have a go, or what you can do is somewhere in the links, there's going to be like a PDF file for you to download from my TES store. It's free. All you need to do is create an account, absolutely free again, and it's just going to download it straight to your computer. Or you can just copy it down onto a piece of paper, and then these purple boxes here are for you to make any changes. And I'm going to go through them with you now. So let's take a look at these questions. List the 4 erosional processes, and you'll notice that the important bits, the things that they want you to answer, are either unbolded or in italics. So there are 4 main processes. Remember, HAAS. H for hydraulic action, the first day attrition, the second day abrasion, and the final one is solution or corrosion. Very often they ask you to explain a process. So if we're talking about hydraulic action, remember the keyword shear pressure. So you will probably have had to, the bits that are underlined are the bits you probably want to include in the answer, because that's where the 2 marks come from. So the shear pressure from the air or the wind forces itself into the cracks and crevices, causing the rocks to split. I should have probably put that on there as well. And then it says list 2 items that will get dissolved during solution. Again, you don't have to probably go into a lot of detail for this, but you could have said minerals, or things like clay or dirt, and rock types, or like sandstone and limestone. So now we've looked at the erosional processes. Let's have a look at the transportational processes. This one, I want to say, is easier if you've got sort of a few letters in mind. It's literally just T and 2 S's, because as I said, solution is in both. So that one's not that difficult to remember. So you've got traction, saltation, and suspension. And one thing that my friend always told me, I sit next to her in geography, she's always told me saltation, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, saltation and suspension, they have their own little ways of remembering them. Right, let's have a look at traction. So traction, and what I tend to find is the transportational methods tend to be a little bit more wordy. So you're probably going to want to pay a bit more attention to these ones. So traction is when the rocks or boulders, typically boulders, are too heavy to be carried in the flow of the water, so they're just rolled instead. Like this picture, you'll see that traction tends to be the bigger rocks that are being involved, because again, they're too heavy. Saltation, now again, saltation is when the pebbles or rocks are bouncing, smaller rocks, they're bouncing on the riverbed. And this usually happens near the source of the river, which is the start of the river. But the way my friend told me to remember this is think of somersaults. When you do somersaults, you're bouncing around and flipping and turning. So there's one way of remembering it. Again, the rocks are going to be smaller than the ones that you see in the traction. Suspension, not really sure if you can use this one properly, but think of a bridge. It's above the water, and the materials in suspension, such as small rocks, they're being carried because they're too light to be doing anything else. They're just sort of in the flow of the water. And then again, solution or corrosion, just the same thing. The minerals being dissolved in the water with things like rocks, such as limestone or sandstone. Similar exam questions, this time it's a little bit different. So you've got, the first task is to label the actual process that's going on in this image. And then the next part is to explain the process of traction in terms of rivers. So again, you can pause this video and just write down 1, 2, 3, 4, answer. Or you can, again, check out the link to my test store, which has actually got this already there for you, so you can just print it out and write on it. Okay, let's have a look at some of these answers. So, for the first one, you've got suspension, because again, you are looking at the floating particles, like a bridge is on top of the water, it's the highest one. Then we've got traction, the large boulders being rolled. You didn't have to write an explanation, I'm just explaining it as I go. The large boulders rolling because they're too heavy. You've got solution, a little bit more difficult to see, but when you look at saltation, obviously this is saltation because of the summer salts, it sort of put it down to process of elimination. So there would have been, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 marks. Then this one here, 2 marks. So explain the process of traction. I haven't underlined it, but I will tell you what you needed to have written to get the marks. So I would have said something along the lines of large boulders being rolled along the riverbed as they are too heavy to be carried in the water. So definitely too heavy to be carried as 1 mark, or something along those lines. And boulders or rocks, but with the word large, because rocks, you could have rocks, but then the exam board are really, really picky, so you just want to make sure that you put in as much detail as possible. It's better to write more and get full marks than it is to write less and get no marks. And that brings us to the end of this section.